we can get down our execution time for trades from 400 milliseconds, which is what we were running on like the previous iteration of our platform, down to 2 milliseconds, which I think is like super impressive and super groundbreaking. It's actually like on par with centralized exchanges and actually better than most other kind of DEXs that we've seen out there. And we want all the price discovery to be happening on-chain on a DEX at the speed that information basically moves.
GM, welcome back to Solana Crossroads, an absolutely incredible event. I'm joined today by Tristan from Bullet.xyz, formerly Zeta Markets. Tristan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So just to get things kicked off, I want you to give us a bit of a background about what is Bullet and what is your role there exactly?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the founder of Bullet. We've been building in the Solana space for quite a number of years, 4 years at this point, building around DeFi and perps trading. And so Bullet is our kind of latest iteration of our platform. It's really a bet on network extensions for Solana. So how can we speed up execution and basically reduce latency, which is what everyone's talking about in the Solana space, and do that especially in the context of perps trading. So we are building basically an execution layer on top of Solana, which uses data availability and settlement of Solana, but we can get extremely fast performance, and that makes it really good for kind of financial use cases. So we got into the space actually in the early days because I talked to Tolly and I was really bought into his vision of a NASDAQ on-chain. So that's what we're trying to go for.
Okay, fantastic. So I really want to focus in on that NASDAQ on-chain angle. How do Solana Layer 2s, or network extensions, however we want to be calling them, how do they fit into the Layer 1's NASDAQ on-chain narrative? Why do we need Layer 2s on top of what is already a highly performant Layer 1?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we've been building, like I said, for a number of years, and we've seen DeFi really take off on Solana, which has been fantastic. But to clarify, that's mostly on the spot trading side. So we've seen Radium, Pump Fund, Jupiter, all these platforms really soak up a lot of meme coin volume. You've seen spot volumes actually supersede what we've seen on the Ethereum side, which is incredibly impressive, and I think like a testament to how Solana is becoming the kind of financial hub and the DeFi hub. But we haven't seen quite the same pickup in terms of volumes and adoption, I think, on the perps trading side. I think it still does pretty well. Like last I checked, we're probably number 4 or number 5, like as a chain for perps trading volume, but it's still dwarfed by many of these app chains, I guess, that have really become specialized for perps trading. So that's where Bullet comes into the picture. Really, I talked to Tolly and he was like, I don't want you guys to build another like Arbitrum on Solana. It doesn't make sense to have this general purpose chain because already the fees are very low. Already the TPS is pretty damn good. So ours is very much like an application-specific extension to Solana. That's why people like to use that nomenclature. And so we're really trying to focus on the reducing latency aspect, which is a lot harder to do on the Layer 1 because you have the full consensus mechanism going on. And so the nice thing is with some of the trade-offs, I guess, that we've made, we can get down our execution time for trades from 400 milliseconds, which is what we were running on like the previous iteration of our platform, down to 2 milliseconds, which I think is like super impressive and super groundbreaking. That's actually like on par with centralized exchanges and actually better than most other kind of DEXs that we've seen out there.
On paper, that's 200 times faster, which is like it's a really, really great stat. Why is the Layer 1 poorly optimized for CLOB-based order books?
Yeah, this is a like active debate, and there's a lot of like thought pieces around this on Twitter. I mean, we built for the last couple of years, and we did a fully on-chain order book. Based on Serum back in the day, I think it was like a really good pioneering aspect of on-chain order books, and that was what drew us to Solana. Is like, this is the only chain that's actually possible to build such a product. But there's definitely some limitations. I mean, I can rattle a few off. Like one, the Solana virtual machine on the L1 needs to cater to a lot of different traffic. And so it is a general purpose chain. It needs to do NFTs. It needs to do spot trading and lending and gaming and DePIN and kind of everything. And so we needed to make certain opinionated trade-offs that were a little bit harder. So specifically, I think the block times being, I would say 1 to 2 orders of magnitude, like slower than what we would ideally like in a kind of high frequency trading system. Another big one is like liquidity provision is king in these kind of order book protocols. It's not like, this is why AMMs came about, right? You put money in this like two-sided pool, and then it kind of auto rebalances, based on a bunch of math. The problem is LPs typically in AMMs lose money over time, but they are kind of a beautiful invention in that they allow this permissionless liquidity. So now if we're moving towards order books where you have better price discovery and generally kind of better prices in general, you have limit orders and all these other pro trading features, it becomes really hard to provide liquidity in this regime where you have to update prices. Market makers have to like requote all the time. This actually costs gas. Everything is a transaction on Solana. So you're paying, even though it might be a fraction of a cent, multiply that by millions of transactions, this actually adds up over a long period of time. And then the other thing is just the unpredictability around the fee markets has been really hard. I think ever since the priority fees came through, there was a bit of like non-determinism. How do you kind of calculate these things? There have been problems, I guess, with how the fee markets have functioned. Sometimes you'll put in a high fee and you'll actually get beaten out by a low fee. And they're changing these things in the scheduler, but it just made it very hard for us to run our business, essentially. And when you have this separate execution layer, we don't have to compete with every other protocol that's out there for block space. We can retweak, I guess, some of the gas fee markets, and then obviously we can bring the block times down to be like extremely, extremely fast. And that's what we were trying to solve for. Like the thing that sucks is like when we went through, I don't know if you remember last year, but Solana had a bunch of congestion problems. Things would just get lost, essentially. They would go to nodes and then they would not make it to the port and they would get dropped. And so people would trade on our platform and their order would just vanish.
Thanks or supply.
Yeah, exactly. And they kind of fixed this with stake-weighted quality of service that made it a lot better. But yeah, there was just like kind of thorny scenarios where people would have, let's call it like stop losses that they want to close out their position. And instead, those things just like didn't end up going through or got congested. People get liquidated and lose money. And we're like, okay, this is kind of a problem and something that we need to solve kind of at the root cause level.
So evidently there's a lot of perks and a lot of benefits to taking that execution off the layer one, because you have a really kind of siloed, hyper-optimized performance base that is purely designed for trading. Does that mean that you've had to make certain sacrifices on what you can kind of expand to otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main compromise that you make is around synchronous composability. That's something that's really important for, I think, spot trading platforms in particular. So, for example, a platform like Jupe, I don't think would really exist on its own kind of chain. It needs to integrate, 10 different AMMs under the hood, be able to do all this routing. But when you look in the derivative space for perps especially, I think a lot of these platforms tend to vertically integrate. And like speaking for us personally, we didn't have like crazy amounts of composability and stuff built on top of us. Like it's mostly vaults and some like algo trading stuff. And I think you see this for many other centralized exchanges. They are their kind of own whole kind of system, and they offer that whole product suite under there. So we were pretty happy and okay with making that trade-off. But I do agree with you, like to the extent that we can kind of minimize that friction as much as possible, having the deposit experience into the layer 2, making that really seamless and close to instant, and making it feel like you're still using stuff on the layer 1, being able to bridge in and out. I think that's basically our goal there.
We were speaking on a panel yesterday. It was absolutely fantastic with Chris Zhu. You mentioned that at launch, Bullet's not going to have an SVM. Now, that does allow you to be kind of hyper-focused, like we said, but that also means that you can't really develop a wider DeFi ecosystem. What's the outlook there, and what's kind of the plan to let that grow organically?
So the reason why we did that off the bat was kind of touching on what I mentioned before, which is we want to create basically like the perfect environment to do perps trading. And when we were building, I guess specifically all our perps engine, specifically our margin engine, using the constraints of the Solana virtual machine, you have stuff like the accounts model, where you can only load in, I think it was like 30 to 35 accounts in a transaction. This makes it really hard to build something that's like a fully cross-margined perps platform, where you might have hundreds of assets and you need to be able to take essentially the mark prices from all of them, be able to use that for like risk calculations. And so we had essentially this upper bound limit on the amount of markets that we could list and how we could do the margining there. Also other things like it just takes away some of the strict bounds that we have in terms of compute limits and things like that. So we decided for the core primitives essentially that are enshrined into our layer, the spot trading, the perps trading, and the borrow lend, those kind of exist as this primitive Lego blocks that we can use there that don't have these constraints. They just run purely in raw Rust, and we also kind of run them through what's called a zero-knowledge virtual machine that can take any Rust code or any C++ code, and it can basically generate proofs of execution. So it's like provable, verifiable computation, which is pretty nice. And so we've just run that purely in Rust. And then, yeah, to your point, it makes it harder or difficult for people to build permissionless smart contracts on top of that because it's very opinionated there. So we will be introducing support in the coming months for kind of an SVM sidecar almost. I think this is somewhat similar to what Hyperliquid have done. They have Hypercore and then they have Hyper EVM. But obviously, because we're Solana guys, we're more focused on the SVM side of things. So adding that support in the coming months and letting people build whatever they might want on top of it, like I said, vaults, or maybe they want to build a funding rate-based, stable coin like Athena on top of our protocol. Anyone should be able to come in there and build on top of it.
You mentioned before you've brought latency down to about 2 milliseconds, 4 milliseconds, something like that. It's 200 times faster than Solana. It's faster than Hyperliquid. It's comparable to Binance. For the average user, for me, if I sign in, I start a trade, I click through the order books, I don't notice the difference really between 200 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, something like that. How do you quantify what these leaps and bounds are for the average user, and why is it so critical for heavy frequency traders?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think a lot of people probably get confused by that, and they're like, why do I care about these couple of milliseconds? It's not really important, and that's actually true because to an end user, placing your trade, whether it's 2 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds doesn't really make a difference. But approaching it from the angle of liquidity is actually why we made a lot of these decisions. So we are kind of catering to make a liquidity and making that really robust. And so what kind of happens there is if your block times are quite slow, for example, we started on Ethereum maybe 4 and a bit years ago trying to build this protocol. And if you have block times that are multiple seconds, price discovery is happening at a very, very fast rate on platforms like Binance, where price discovery tends to happen. And so all these AMMs that are occurring in the Ethereum world are just getting arbitraged all the time. You can imagine price move happens, Trump announces something, suddenly prices are up here, all the AMMs are still quoting it down here. And then someone is coming in, they're just continually doing this centralized, decentralized exchange arb. And LPs, as a result, are just always losing money. And so that's probably not the most sustainable way to do it long term. As a result, either your AMMs just bleed money, or whoever is market making on these dexes, professionals, for example, they're just going to lose money over time. And so that's kind of tough. And so, we try and focus on this maker side, the supply side, essentially, of the equation. We try and make it very fast and very easy to, change up your quotes, replace liquidity, kind of move with the speed of the market. And that's all our goal of bringing price discovery on chain. We don't want to be a price lagger in this kind of stuff. We want meme coins to be happening. We want Solana native launches to be happening. And we want all the price discovery to be happening on chain on a DEX. And so if those people can come in, they can quote these things really quickly, at the speed that information basically moves, then I think you start seeing more volumes and more price discovery happening on that platform. That results in tighter spreads, which is really good for retail users who are going to come in and trade that and get better prices. And then the more that they trade, the people who are actually providing liquidity, obviously it's more profitable business for them. And then that's kind of this virtuous cycle that we're trying to build. So the execution, for the user doesn't matter, but the knock-on effects are good liquidity, good trading experience.
And just better capital efficiency in internet capital markets, basically, I'm going to switch gears a bit. The Bullet testnet launched in March. You've still got quite a good follower base and a user base of people from the Zeta Markets days. How's the response been to testnet so far? What's the feedback like? Are you seeing new users coming in since the rebrand? Kind of give me an oversight of how things are tracking there.
So we went through this kind of rebrand exercise, given the new vision and the new kind of outlook for what we're building. But it's been good. I think a lot of people who are existing traders of our platform definitely like trading on there. They kind of understood and appreciated trading on our platform. We're very focused on the club-based approach, and people did give us the feedback that that they like that a lot better than AMMs, especially the professionals. But there was definitely some difficulties in the UX side of things. Getting really robust, deep liquidity on that platform, and those, I don't want to call it too early, but I think we've basically tackled all those problems and are solving it. Yes, it's a test net. It's all funny money for now, but I think the tech is working pretty damn well. So with the test net, we kind of simulated what it would be like having actual really good liquidity on there and having people trade on that. And it was cool. Yeah, we got a lot of feedback on Telegram and Twitter, people coming in and just saying, wow, it is instant. I click the button, there's no spinner, there's no waiting, my transaction doesn't get dropped. It is just guaranteed straight through. Other things have been a lot better. A big complaint or issue that we had back in the past was execution of take profit and stop loss, these kind of conditional orders that you'll set at a certain price. And the thing was, when those would trigger sometimes, doing it purely on the L1, you would have to like resend it, you'd have to send it with GTO tips, you'd have to, there was all these like strategies on how to maybe not game the fee markets, but try and insert your transaction that could sometimes be really hard. And this is especially a problem when the markets nuke or the markets pump, essentially. All these liquidations are happening. Everyone's trying to get in. The chain actually gets clogged as prices are moving, and that's when everyone needs it to be unclogged and things happening. So the nice thing is in some of the testnet testing that we've been doing, it's held up pretty damn well. Like prices will move, all these things will get executed and kind of flush through the pipeline. So we're hoping for very high uptime and high kind of reliability on these things.
So the introduction of L2s into this wider Solana ecosystem has been contentious, to say the least. There's a lot of people who think we don't need them. Yeah. How would you assure these people that we're not going to see the same fragmentation and liquidity issues that have happened over on Ethereum with, so many layer 2s popping up and liquidity moving out? Yep. How do we avoid this mistake?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, I agree. We discussed this on the panel yesterday with Chris, like how many L2s are we going to see? I don't think it's going to be a repeat of Ethereum by any means, because the L1 is scalable, and I would say 95% of builders are going to remain using the L1, which is good. So I don't believe in the kind of bankless idea of millions of L2s. I think that's just kind of bad UX. It's going to be a bit painful, but I think there will be a few super apps that go this direction. Us, obviously, one example. I think Sonic is doing a pretty good job. I see Jupe are doing their own JupeNet as well. I don't know the full details on it, but there's a few people experimenting with this. So I don't imagine we'll see thousands. I doubt we'll even see hundreds, but I think we will see a handful. And in terms of the fragmentation, I think that is really important. I think a lot of the core primitives will still exist on the L1. There are opportunities if these rollups use Solana as the data availability layer to get asynchronous composability, and those things are things that we're researching right now in that how can we make that better?
Okay, fantastic. Well, it has been called the Hyperliquid of Solana. It's a cool name, it's a thing that people get really excited about. At the same time, Hyperliquid is doing about 6, 7, 8 times more perp volume than the Solana layer 1 at the moment. How does Bullet close that gap?
That was like a big motivator for us getting in there quickly with this new product. We just saw that Solana, like I mentioned, was lagging behind in some of the perps volume, and it's kind of painful. I mean, I respect the Hyperliquid team and great product, and I use it, and it's very nice. But for a Solana native audience, it's kind of a shame that these guys have to bridge to Arbitrum and get outside the ecosystem when we could deliver a very native experience there. And so I think that's where we come into the picture. We haven't seen a really professional grade trading experience on Solana. I mean, honestly, I think it was FTX back in the day was kind of what everyone used their piggy bank. They would trade all the futures on there, and that was really quite a good system while it lasted, technology wise. And there's just been this massive void, I would say, in the meantime, in that kind of Solana space. And you've seen the meme coins, like I said, really popping off, but I think perps trading is still kind of lagging. I think Jupiter's doing pretty well, but there are definitely some drawbacks in terms of the amounts of assets and the high fees that they have to have in their kind of GMX style model. And so we're taking like a radically different approach and trying to build that out. And I think our approach is also like, even though you can see some of the comparables to Hyperliquid, the way we're approaching it from the technology side is completely different. We're going for this kind of ZK approach, which I think is, we could have gone and forked Solana and just run it with like a handful of validators, 4 validators, whatever it is. I think some guys are doing this with Fired Answer essentially, and we'll see how that turns out. But we're taking a different approach where we're taking a roll up. We don't have to bootstrap essentially this L1 validator set. We're taking this kind of ZK approach essentially where everything is provable. We can take these fraud proofs essentially and proofs of execution. We can post them back down to the L1. Anyone can go through and essentially like validate a bunch of these things, which I think is a very cool approach. It's something very novel and something that's only really been possible or available this year with breakthroughs in zero knowledge technology.
So looking ahead, what's the North Star for Bullet in 2025? How will you know you've been successful by the end of the year? Yeah,
I mean, probably our KPIs, I would say trading volume is a big one, even though it's, some folks can game it. I think TVL is also nice to get in there. That's just like a sticky measure of how much people kind of trust the platform. Obviously, we want to focus on users, real users, people coming in there and using it. And so I think for us, at least starting small, we're going to have a bit of a private beta for mainnet, getting in the right people who are serious about trading and kind of gradually opening it up, I think will be really good. And so rather than trying to optimize for, let's get 100,000 plus people in there all trading. I would really like to focus on that segment of professional traders, really hone the experience, make sure that the platform is really safe and kind of holds up under these difficult market conditions, and then just talking to the pros, getting the feedback, incorporating that into the product. That's actually been like a really fun experience, and to be honest, something I don't see enough in crypto. People tend to build in a vacuum, ship the thing, launch the token, and then they're like, why doesn't my thing have any product market fit? Whereas I think something that's good in Web 2 startup building is these guys are very like product focused, and it's something I love to talk to. For example, like Richard and Ilya from Tensor, they also have that mindset. It's like all about the customer, all about the product. So hopefully we can do good things there.
Fantastic. Tristan, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you on this.
No, I appreciate it. And Crossroads has been great, so it's a pleasure to be here and experience everything that Istanbul has to offer.
Awesome, great. Well, thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next round.
Perfect.